So hello, it's been a while.
It has. We are gathered here today. back once
Truly,
again
and
under
it is
less than stellar circumstances.
exactly. These aren't ideal times. It's true. It's a sad time for us poets.
Mhm.
So supposedly a happy new year, but it's not, because I believe if I can find on December 29th, 2022, I was told that poetry is dead. So I haven't confirmed it. I've suspected for a while that it was on a downward spiral, that organs were shutting down. But it's one thing to think it, and it's one thing to know it. And it's been confirmed via the New York Times by op-ed writer Matthew Walter. And yeah, there it is. It's a shock to all us writers out there. What have we been doing this whole time? Just playing with the corpse, apparently.
I've been lying in bed, threw all my books away, all of them, and yeah, I like us all, just stunned, shocked. It's been really hard to cope. Twitter feeds and Facebook is it's just doom scrolling, hearing everybody's thoughts and prayers and comments and hot takes.
That's right.
I was gonna reread that guy's op-ed thing to prepare for today, but I go back and relive it.
I did. I read it this morning, and I'm so enthused. And I like that he also puts blame on T.S. Eliot for it. Simultaneously uplifts Eliot while kind of blaming him
for murdering poetry.
Yeah, yep. Eliot with that headshot, just coming in with the wasteland, and then just sniped us.
I was gonna reread it. I was gonna reread it, but because we did talk about it when it first came out, and I think I had mentioned, I don't even know where to put my tissues. Hang on, I did mention that I liked the way it started in its commentary about the internet and all this stuff, and I thought it was going to be like a solid read, and then just became too many white man tears, too much Criarreah. I was like, I can't revisit this, so I'm just going to accept what this guy who I've never heard of has said, and just put the nail in the coffin. If it's all right with you, Michael, I'd like to read a poem just in remembrance, of acknowledging this terrible loss by the only poet worth reading, which is the great T.S. Eliot.
The great late T.S. Eliot.
Yes. I'll keep this as brief as possible. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time, through the unknown, remembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. At the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree. Not known, because not looked for, but heard, half heard, in the stillness between two waves of the sea. Quick now, here now, always, a condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well when the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crowned knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one.
Amen. Amen, Eliot.
Worth reading in the English language. The late T.S. Eliot.
For everyone out there, pour some out for our boy T.S. Eliot.
Yep. And poetry. May it rest.
And poetry.
In power.
I just heard the news. Condolences to both of you.
Sad. It is a sad day for all of us.
Edibles bouquet should be showing up shortly.
So kind. So kind. Bert's like, I thought it's been dead for like 5 centuries now. That's right.
I have to take off these glasses because they're making my eyes water. Okay.
Oh gosh. I am as amused by this op-ed as I am the responses. I don't know why people are so mad. I just don't get it. It could be dead for all I care. I would still read it and I would still write it. So I don't understand why him saying anything matters to anyone else. I just don't get it. I don't understand the uproar, I guess.
I think there's a couple of things about the uproar, which is one, it was in between Christmas and New Year's, and I think everybody just had nothing else to do. And two, I think everyone's talking about how this idea, these op-eds about poetry's dead come out like every 3 to 5 years or whatever. So
Yep.
that clickbait is kind of, familiar. We've all seen people declare that poetry's dead, and then you open it up and you read it, and it's kind of this, I don't know, it was a very meandering rant. Clearly this guy loves T.S. Eliot, and that's good, fine, that's all. It should have just been like my ode to T.S. Eliot, but I don't think anybody would have clicked on that.
Meandering is a great word for it. There's a lot of like, come with me if you will, as I explore. Like, I don't care.
Let us
dude.
go,
like,
you and I. In my op-ed in the sky. I do think it started off strong with talking about poetry and the internet, which is a wonderful conversation to have, because poetry may not be in its infancy anymore, but it is still a bit of a drunken toddler. Just stomping around asking for snacks all the time,
just throwing tantrums. Angrily hitting people.
Exactly. And it's worth contemplating and having a conversation about how we are using and utilizing this ever-changing, fast-paced world of World Wide Web, and that it's, so for that, to me, it started off strong, but obviously like I said before, I think it lost its thread. I think a lot of people have interpreted it as we should be one with nature and sort of unplugging and this and that, and that's kind of an antiquated idea. And like we were talking to our one and only friend Clint the other day.
Yay!
And he brought up a really good point, which was like the internet now is like nature at some, like so much unknown territory and things to discover. It's a different way to ingest poetry, and we have to kind of like come to terms with that a bit. But I don't think it is the death of poetry. I think it's just a transitional time for the people, like we discussed in our last show, who have one leg in the old, pre-internet days and another in today. And so that to me would have been a way more interesting op-ed.
I think there's conversations why poetry is at least dying or unhealthy in this country, and I think we could talk about MFA and student debt and just a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, this guy apparently only thinks T.S. Eliot. It's all about Eliot, which is fine, whatever.
Then it turned into a T.S. Eliot like bashing thing too, and like this is not his fault that he got resurrected for this conversation.
He didn't want to be part of this. I'm sassy. It's a new year.
It is.
Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year.
Hooray.
And I don't know what you think. Should we call this like a new season? since it's
Ooh.
a new year? Should we
We
transition
should.
it called season 2?
Season 2, we've been renewed by our sponsors.
Yeah, Netflix renewed us for a second season. I'm so excited.
That's right. And if you don't know who we are, since we haven't announced it yet, we are Table for Deuce, where we shoot the shit about all things lit, including op-eds about how poetry is dead. With me, as always, is Kate Hanson Foster, who I describe as all the parts of Good Will Hunting, except Matt Damon in the genius part. But all the loud talk, you got that. That's you.
Get out of here, you kid. All right.
Well, welcome, Kate Hanson Foster, co-host, author of Pro Funeral and Midriff, and all-around amazing person, despite that intro.
And yeah, well, okay. And I'm here with my friend, poet, Michael Schmeltzer, author of Blood Song and Empire of Surrender. And when he is not writing, he is no longer on the internet at
Yay!
all.
Hooray!
He's gone. And so while Michael becomes the Lester Holt of himself, you're like the anchor man, I have to go out into the field like a reporter intern, unknown person, and report back to you daily on what's happening on the internet.
I am comfortably in the studio while we shove you out into the storms and ask you how the weather is. Don't want any part of social media. I am just slowly gonna, I don't even know what happens to poets when they're not on social media. I think I'll just eventually like lose matter and just become a pure being of energy. Just gonna float around in the ether now.
You along with poetry. Yep.
Yeah,
just
me, exactly.
Poetry. Angel
me. Anytime you hear someone talk shit about Eliot, another Michael Schmeltzer grows his wings. I believe.
I'm really excited to be back. I think, the break was nice, but I missed this. Yep. I missed chit-chatting and stuff.
Yeah, this is a nice thing we got going. I'm happy and excited to get back into the routine.
Same. If you want to get right into talking about Caitlin Gildrien's poem today, which was suggested to us to read and discuss and toast or roast.
Yes,
should we
that's right. I think we should just go right into it. I'm excited to talk about it. And a weird little tie-in. For Christmas, I bought Lydia tickets to Moulin Rouge at the Paramount Theater. They have the stage/musical version. And it's like her favorite movie, the Baz Luhrmann movie, and a favorite movie. And so they were touring here, so we got to go see them on stage, and they did the whole musical numbers, and it was fantastic. It was a lovely night out. And this poem makes reference to Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, which is fun. So a little tie-in, a little matter of fate. I feel like we're going in the right direction here.
All right, well then I'll just read it.
All right.
You ready?
I am. Do we mention that it's on Rattle? I forget if we said
I'll say it again when I finish reading, but
okay. Yeah, content warning, we mentioned Rattle.
These violent delights have violent ends by Caitlin Gildrien. I don't want to write about California. I don't want to look. Did you know there were 2 new litters of mountain lions in the Santa Monica Mountains? A mama can only carry 1 at a time. I don't know why that's the thing that breaks me. It's the world that breaks me. We've broken the world. Just past the tweet that tells me about the kittens is a thread about Romeo and Juliet, the Claire and Leo movie version. And this is what I click through. How I loved that movie. The fish tank, the kissing. I wanted to live in a world like that. A world like this world, except slant. Better lighting, better language. How you can understand it best by not listening too closely. I think too much. all the fish in that tank scooped probably from the sea. How the sea is failing. I wanted to love someone until they would die for me. I wanted to be the one they would choose to carry out of that burning world. When the fish stocks fail, when the Amazon tips past the point for which it can compensate with the meager reforestation it is allowed, there should be nicer language for this in a poem. I'm sorry. I just keep thinking about Juliet, who thought the sea was infinite, and so a good metaphor for love. But we're determined to find the bottom of any bounty. They thought this continent was boundless too, and scraped it clean to prove themselves it's better. They. Did you see that storm of smoke, utterly apocalyptic over the highway? It makes a person say, God, God, lift me by the scruff, or the throat, maybe. All of us, maybe. Shake hard, be rough with love. And that is from Poets Respond, November 2015, I believe, or maybe
2018.
2018. Sorry, my thing's cut off. Oh, November 15th, 2018. So Caitlin Gildrien, these violent delights have violent ends. I have not heard of this poet before, and I was, I was, I guess I tend to not really like a lot of these sort of, like confessional, not confessional, but like introspective poems, poets that reference writing poetry. That is like some weird thing of mine that is not like, why am I writing this poem? Like that would usually be like when I'm writing a line that I cut. But in this particular case, this idea of like, just sort of like this introspection, this self-introspection that's happening about, lots of things in the world, forest fire, climate change, like all this horrible stuff, and being like, there's no pretty line for this, and just kind of saying it. I think it's a very human response to crisis like that. And I really love some of these lines. I love that line, be rough with love. Just kind of, it's a harsh truth. And I loved the reference of choosing between choosing to kind of go down the rabbit hole of Romeo and Juliet versus, the story about the why am I like losing
losing your mind.
The mountain. I wanted to say bobcat. But yeah, but choosing to go down the rabbit hole of the Romeo and Juliet versus the mountain lions. And that to me is so interesting because it brings up this concept of how the internet really does like juxtapose the mundane and the profound, like so directly beside one another that it's almost impossible to really parse what is worthwhile and what isn't, and what is like great and what is mediocre. And that can go into a big larger conversation about how we treat poetry on the internet, and that's not obviously what this poem's about. But it brought up that image of how like scrolling through the internet, there's just so much at once, and how you pick and choose your own adventure in that way.
Yeah, so the poem itself has a few things that normally, like you said, I would kind of steer away from. I don't make too many pop culture references in my work, even though I am a lover and consumer of pop culture. I don't tend to write about it. Poetry is a different kind of mental realm for me in a lot of ways, though. And this poem does it effectively in a way that's kind of admirable, that I kind of want to emulate. Like I love, like you said, that juxtaposition between the kind of trivial and mundane with something profound. And I think they managed to marry those two things so well in this poem. Also, I don't tend to write response poems unless I'm prompted to by someone, or it's solicited by someone or whatnot. So that's another thing that this poem does. It's part of the Poets Respond series, and that's another thing that I don't do, and I don't necessarily always think can be done very strongly, but I thought they did a great job of that as well. And there's something about kind of this all-encompassing view that they have, or this vision that they have about the internet and Twitter and this information that's coming their way, that they're able to capture really well, just not shutting out the internet, not shutting out the world, and not shutting out their own point of view, and just kind of blending them all in this way that I thought was really interesting and really effective and moving in a lot of ways. I love the title, which I knew from Westworld, but is actually from Romeo and Juliet. So I mean, there's like these little I mean, it's a beautiful quote. It works so well in the context of the poem. I just like their just general overall style, where it's not, there's something really unique about the way they think and the way they move from thought to thought. And it's not flashy, and it's not using any like, you know, $1 million poetry words or anything like that, but it's just really watching the poet's mind at work.
You know, I don't want to keep referencing back to this, you know, that op-ed and everything. But this poem is a really great example of how poetry really isn't dead. And part of it is that I think a poet, or I don't want to say a poet's job, but I think maybe like a poet's urge is to examine something that cannot be contained or controlled, and sort of putting it into words. And that to me is what, you know, when you're looking at the devastation of a forest fire. And I read the little on Rattle, there's always like those cool little instead of like a bio, you get sort of like the poet's perspective. And I think like the poet had mentioned that she like grew up in California, and she's looking back on, you know, her, you know, where she grew up, and watching this forest fire happen and feel so helpless. And I think that's, you know, that's what we do, and that's what people respond to when somebody can so poignantly put into words this thing that we just can't control, we can't really get our hands on. But meanwhile, like, she simultaneously kind of embraces or reflects upon how we're so steeped in distraction, and how we, you know, how you could choose to block it out and click on another, you know, hypertext and go down some other avenue of the internet and just, you know, escape it all. And that's fascinating to me in a lot of ways, you know, both in a good way and a bad way. You know, she sort of owns up to it, that it's like, I'm watching this happen and I feel broken over it. You know, she feels, you know, that line, like, you know, especially this, you know, sympathizing with the mountain lions, and, you know, this idea that the mother may only be able to save just one. And that's the thing that breaks her. And, you know, but then just pivoting and saying, like, we have broken the world. And it's just, oh, like, it just like, and it's really straight to the point. It's a truthful poem. You know, it is a confessional poem. And it's, I think, just very much vulnerable and just sort of, you know, it's poetic with being like, it's poetic by being non-poetic. Like, it's like an anti-poem, but you know what I'm saying? Like, by being like, just kind of being like, there should be nicer language for this, but like, fuck it, I just can't do it, you know, because it wouldn't work. You know, how do you make such a beautiful metaphor for a burning forest fire?
So yeah, I think the poem works in ways that it's almost victorious by means of failure. It's like citing out all these things that are kind of failures of the world or the poet. herself, it's like, I don't want to write about California, I don't want to look. It's like admitting these flaws and admitting that we've broken the world and it's the world that breaks me. There's all these moments where I think of as failure as this kind of propelling force throughout this poem. I mean Romeo and Juliet, the classic kind of doomed failed romance, right? And it has all these things about being like when the fish stock fail and can't reforest the Amazon, and all these things are just this point of kind of no return. And it's like, how do you kind of deal with that? How do you deal with that in writing? And like you said, it's not a matter of covering it up with immense lyricism, and sometimes it's just saying these things pretty plainly. I want to talk a little bit about the ending. I'm really curious. I love the stanza right above the last line here. They thought this continent was boundless too and scraped it clean to prove themselves it's better. They, just that single they all by itself, it always made me feel like it was this kind of, not like smirk or anything like that, but it was very much like we can convince ourselves that we are not part of the problem while simultaneously, like, that there's that sense of that for me. And I'm not sure if you got the same sense, but it definitely, for me, feels like the author understands their complicit like nature of just being in this world and using resources, and like just that sense of, could we do more? Or how can we do more? Is there even a point to doing more at this stage of decline?
Yeah, I mean, I teeter-totter on that line, because there is a little bit of lack of ownership. Not that, where there's the current, I guess, how we view things now, the more acceptable line, I think, would be, I'm guessing this is a white woman, I'm assuming this is a white woman, the more acceptable line, I think, would be, we thought this continent was boundless too, sort of taking ownership for being, a part of this. You live here, your ancestors are here, that kind of thing. It's a detachment from the we, which would be, I think, the general, I don't know, maybe I think that would be kind of, if I were writing, I'd be like, oh yeah, we thought this continent, but the way she really detaches herself and says, they thought this continent was boundless too and scraped it clean to prove themselves it's better. They, like, it's like she wants to make sure that it is obvious that she chose they for a reason that she does not feel as though like she is a contributing part of that. And so I have mixed feelings. I mean, I feel lots of things, helpless feelings about things that may have happened in the past that obviously I did not contribute to, but also, have to take a little bit of ownership of my own life, and that the they, is why I'm here today, is what, is why I live my life. I can't deny that. I can't say that the they didn't build up a sort of infrastructure that I benefit from. And so it feels a little bit too detached.
For me, the impression is throughout the poem, you have this kind of back and forth between I, we, and they. So you have like the, I don't want to write about California, I don't want to look, and then it's the world that breaks me, and then we've broken the world, and then it keeps kind of going back and forth, and then goes on the Romeo and Juliet stanza, and then how can you understand it, or how you can understand it best by not listening too closely, I feel like is a really interesting and important line. In a way, I think there is a way to pummel someone with facts where they will shut down. And I think that happens a lot, especially in talks about kind of climate change and the global kind of status, or global, whatever you want to call it, health in that realm. It seems like there's a lot of doom and gloom, and a lot of like, by 2050, we're all going to be dead, or it's going to be overpopulated, there won't be enough food, and it feels hopeless. So I think there's a lot of that. Like, if we just try not to listen too closely, as it states. I think it's easier to understand than if we just really literally listen to everything. I think it just shuts humans down. I don't think there's a way to kind of bypass that. So I think there's a lot of this kind of happening in the poem, which is trying to understand or comprehend the world in a way that isn't shutting down the person who is trying to observe, because there's already the admission that they don't want to look, and there's the admission that the world's broken them, and there's the apology before, I'm sorry, I just keep thinking of Juliet. And I think there is that sense for me of ownership, because there's the we're determined to find the bottom of any bounty, and then it switches to they, and it gives me a little bit of the lady doth protest too much type of feeling in that Shakespearean sense, where it's like there's a lot of like, okay, they did this, they, and then separating out the they like that makes me think that emphasis is just too much. Like they're aware of their own thing and they're trying to maybe distance themselves to alleviate a little bit of the guilt, perhaps. And then it kind of culminates in that last line or the last few lines where it's talking about God, and then, lift me by the scruff or the throat, maybe, all of us, maybe. And I love that maybe there, the uncertainty of like who is responsible, maybe it's everyone, maybe not, like that idea of like who is actually in charge of this, who can do anything to help. And I just,
well, sort of that sort of, lift some by the scruff, some by the throat, kind of like picking and choosing, like, you fucked up, you are saved. And it makes you wonder, I don't know, it makes you wonder exactly, I'd love to know what the meaning behind that really just heavy they. I think we could go in all sorts of circles about it, like whether it's passing the buck, or like dodging responsibility, that kind of thing, or if it's just condemning history and how we got to this point, which is valid as well. You could feel the weight of that they, like it's heavy, like it lands heavy, it reads heavy. It's full of disdain and disgust. It's just like they. I don't know why, I even read it like a like comes in my head as I read it. At the end of the day, it's when it comes to is poetry dead, or even is the internet ruining poetry, is the way we consume poetry dimming the quality of it. As far as I'm concerned, language is always going to prevail, and this particular poem, even though it's not, it's almost anti-language, anti-lyrical in a lot of ways, and it's blunt lines, and it's sort of like anti-poetic lines. I think it still contains the language that moves us, and I definitely felt I felt it. Shake hard, be rough with love. It's like, obviously I took it as like that we all maybe need a little tough love lesson in terms of like where we're going with our lives, where we're going with the climate, where, and maybe even where we're going on how she owns her own distraction from it, her own willingness to block out hard truths, and that she kind of is almost admitting that maybe she needs that shake too, or maybe she's the one doing the shaking. It's kind of, it can go in all directions as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. I do get the sense that it's like a wake-up call. It feels like, and I guess what I really like about the poem, and I tried to articulate it earlier, is that I like the sense of alarm in this poem without it being an alarmist poem. And I think that's what I was trying to state when I was saying how you can understand it best by not listening too closely. That line feels exactly what like it's trying to do, is that this poem is saying some very important things without needing to be overly soapboxy or preachy about it. I think the way they just blend in, like you said, this almost kind of anti-poetry, anti-lyrical kind of statements. I mean, the line just past the tweet that tells me about the kittens is a thread about Romeo and Juliet. I mean, that's just packed with like just modern day kind of tech and pop culture references, and it is one that works just so well, and one that I would never have written in a million years.
Yes. I had a little trouble on some of it felt I struggled to even read it. Just there's a lot of syntactical confusion, I guess. Like I felt like I was like, okay, end of sentence, and then you get to like the part where it's like where the fish stocks fail, when the Amazon tips past the point for which it can compensate with a meager reforestation it is allowed. That is a long sentence. And it's not even a sentence really. I mean, it just stops there with like the M dash and and kind of cuts it off. So it's like I like it and I don't like it. And so it's hard to read. It's a little bit like I stumbled over it. I almost didn't have enough breath for that sentence to read aloud. And then it just but then like the ownership of it, of just being like, forget it. So this line, they thought this continent was boundless too and scraped it clean to prove themselves it's better. Could you explain me that line, please? Like, how do you take it out? Like,
so
prove themselves it's better. It's not it's better. It's not, it is better. Almost it's supposed to be it is better. Or it's a little, that line's a little confusing to me. What do you think?
I think at least the way I read it was it's almost like so, and having been raised a private Catholic school child, you understand the whole like man, quote unquote, man was given dominion over the birds and the sea, or whatever that line is. I forget. I can't quite birds in the sea, but basically like God gave Adam and Eve like dominion over the world, basically, right, over the creatures and all that. So I think it's somewhat that kind of sense of, to prove that basically humanity or corporations or CEOs, whoever you want to say, that they were better. So it's basically like they were able to just take advantage or ravage the land or basically use everything up because they were better than it was. Like they had a higher purpose or a higher calling or whatever it may be. So I think the kind of, in a very poetic way of saying, just they were terrible colonists or users or that kind of thing is what I tend to get out of that line.
Meaning like it's better to scrape it clean than to think that it's boundless.
Yeah, I maybe I'm not 100% sure, but I do.
There's no apostrophe, so it's like it's. I don't know if that's just a typo. It's possible, but they thought this continent was boundless too, and scraped it clean to prove themselves it's better. So if it was like it's better, if the idea being like it's better to scrape it clean than to live in a boundless world, I don't think that that could be it. I don't know. It's just, that line is hard. I love this idea of like, they thought this continent was boundless too, and obviously it's not, and that is harsh reality, and but I don't know if the line fulfills its intention.
Mm.
I think probably if this poem went through like another edit, that maybe there would be something to clarify exactly what the poet's trying to say here.
But yeah, some of the language is syntactically very interesting. There's a lot of like confessional moments that I enjoy this
Yeah.
that are just like, yep, I'm sorry, or, you know, don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. And I just, that can sometimes fail in a poem, but I think they did it well.
Yeah. I mean, even
And I
that
think,
line that I said that was a little rambly, the one that I
Mhm,
like, I lost breath almost in reading it.
mhm.
When the fish stocks fail, when the Amazon tips past the point for which it can compensate for the meager reforestation it is allowed.
Yeah.
But then by just being like, there should be nicer language for this poem, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like those two lines juxtaposed together is great, I think.
Mhm,
Which it almost saves, it sort of saves that sort of, breathlessness that is kind of like, I think, relevant when it
mhm,
comes to panic and feeling like, there's just no control over what's happening, and you're trying to explain this feeling of hopelessness, and it's just like you just cut it off and say, I'm sorry. She has a really great way of making up for those weird little things, syntactical, whether they might be errors or just kind of random runoff
mhm.
lines. I think she does a good job of saving it in a way.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There's a way where you could just make this poem so overly lyrical and use language that is too nice, but it would defeat the point. I think I love that they, like, I mean, meager reforestation is not a very pleasant sounding phrase, but I love that they used it. And like you said, they balance it out by acknowledging that. And I think poets can hide behind lyricism in the same way that, some poets can hide behind just like fancy words to compensate for lack of true intellectual thought or profound ideas. And I don't think this poet has any issue with that, as far as there's no need to hide. I think their mind is working in such a unique and fascinating way that I think overly lyrical lines would do the poem an injustice. It's basically, I don't even know. It's like, when someone dresses up real fancy, but they're just a horrible person. I feel like I say that dressed. I feel
I don't
a
know
little.
what you're talking about. How dare you? The poet declares right off the bat, I don't want to write about this. I don't want to do it. And that is just kind of like, it just puts the fine point on it. Like, I don't want to do it, but I have an urgency to, like, something bigger is making me do it. And that is why poetry is not dead, my friend.
I'm like, yeah. But should it be dead? Let's tackle that on the next show. But should it be dead? Should we kill it?
Yeah, like next show. How do we actually murder poetry?
So let's say I wanted to kill it. If you have a suggestion, please email me.
But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And you bring up really great points in terms of just, that there is a certain, I think, common thought right now that to write good poetry is to be lyrically superior to other forms of poetry, and that it has to have that sort of tasty twist of words that delight us. But do those types of poems really get down to the truth of things, whether it's a personal truth or a global truth, or whatever it. I think that this one, I keep calling this a confessional poem. Maybe somebody might disagree with me, but I think this poem is is so much confessing its inability to achieve any of it, that it almost ironically gets to the point of what we can all relate to. Yeah.
All right, I think, do you feel ready? Do you feel ready to cast our toast or roast on this one?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
All right.
I'll go first, since I picked this one out of Jory's pile that he sent us. And I don't want to go too far back down the road we already traveled, to say, there's, obviously I brought up some lines that were a little weird to me. I don't want to just be redundant is all. And so yes, there's some weird lines. I felt syntactically it was a little hard to read. I stumbled a little bit on that. But the overall picture, and even though like I said at the beginning, I really don't like when poets write about writing poems. I don't like when poets write about poetry in their poems. That's something it just feels like it should be removed at some point in an editing process. However, the overall theme of this poem, the intent, the impact, all of it, I think is very successful. I'm not surprised that it got picked up in Rattle, and I love the last line. It really felt, that desperation, that take me by the throat or take me by the scruff, just take me, I don't care. I just loved it. And so I toasted this poem for sure. Toast it. I really liked it.
Yeah, so my vote, so I was captivated right off the bat by the title. I liked how they began. It was kind of surprising. They do so many things that I personally choose not to do in my own writing, but they do it so well that it makes me want to imitate it and try it. Like their ability to just put together what they're thinking and what they're consuming all together in one poem in such a smart yet organic kind of almost stream of consciousness, but definitely crafted way. It's just so good. And despite the fact that there might be a little line here and there that, like you said, it can kind of stumble on the mouth a little bit, or it's a little clunky here and there, there's nothing in it that makes me feel like they were trying too hard or that they were trying to write a poem per se. It just really feels like I am in this poet's head and I'm with them while they're thinking through these things and consuming these things and looking at different stories. And I like that about this poem, and I like that about a lot of the poems I read, is that it's a glimpse into how a brain and a mind is processing events and how they are experiencing the world. And I think that is such a humanizing thing. And I think if any person is needing to feel something about the environment or needing to feel something about another person or whatnot, I think poems like this are the thing to do it. It's very humanizing, and it takes these concerns and ideas and puts them in a way that is accessible and moving. And so I happily toast this poem. I think it is so good. And I think the poet is such a smart and really just fantastic writer. And I'm so sad that this is the first poem I've read from them, but I will definitely be keeping an eye out for that name as often as I can find it. So,
this is a perfect poem to sort of revive, to bring out the defibrillator on poetry, so that we, to see how it truly is still alive, in the sense that we just need it. We need a way to verbalize our perspectives. And also, the internet is a complicated place. Trash definitely overtakes treasure, I think, when you're in it, and it's hard to sort of parse through all of that and find something good within it, or even find meaningful poetry. But I think it's worthwhile to mention that not only, is this a great poem, but by finding it on the internet, it also came with the ability to listen to the poet. There's a recording attached to, I'll post the link in the notes, but a reading of it as well. And so, we do approach, like, whether or not this op-ed has just a huge problem, this guy had a huge problem with the internet destroying, our inability or our ability to have, sort of that quiet introspection of reading, absorbing poetry, writing poetry, that we have to be 100% disconnected. And I can relate to that in a lot of ways. Obviously, you disconnecting from social media can relate to that. But I do think that there is something to be said for, especially with this poem, directly referencing the diversion, of choosing the diversion, of going down a different path, and kind of writing about it and examining that. And I can't think of another poem off the top of my head that really puts into words so wonderfully like she does, that says, like, I went down this hole instead of watching California burn, and owning it, and kind of showing a bit how the internet is involved in our lives, which we just unfortunately or fortunately have to just accept.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've been thinking about what you said is there are poems that kind of deal with, that tackle the internet or social media in a different way. And I think any of the ones that I've read, I can't recall a specific one, but they do it in kind of a cutesy, kitschy way, where it doesn't take the matter seriously. It seems like these extremes where you either deal with it in this kind of light way, or you deal with it in this very, it's all negative kind of way. There's these binaries. And I think what this poet does so well is to acknowledge its existence and role in the poet's own life in a way, but not dwell on whether it's good or bad. It's just kind of how it is. And I really like that. There isn't necessarily a huge judgment on it. And it's like just acknowledging that this is part of our environment now. This is part of our world. And like you said, it's going to be here. I don't think there's going to be a time where tech won't be around unless there's a giant apocalyptic event of some sort. But for now, we are where we are with it. The poet's ability to incorporate technology, social media, and its effect without being too judgmental about it and just acknowledging it is great. And I think it's such an oversimplification to say like the internet ruined poetry or social media ruined poetry. I mean, I like to say that a lot, but it's not true. It's just a very simplified version of the story. But if there are minds like this poet's at work, like poetry won't ever die, no matter what medium comes in our way. Like Caitlin Gildrien, you are fantastic. So please keep writing, and please like just keep us updated on your life and poetry, because this is great stuff.
I agree.
All right. So now I am excited. I have a poem for next time, and I wanted to take a deep dive into some small journal, or a smaller journal than Rattle for sure, and a poet that I'm not sure if you've heard of. Have you heard of the poet Jameson Crabtree?
Nope.
Fantastic. So I am looking at a poem called A Manual for All of Your Collisions, and it's in the online journal Cartridge Lit. And this is a journal dedicated to work inspired by video games. So I have been very much geeking out to video games as of late. I've always been a gamer. It's not something I really talk about too much, but I love them, and I've been really obsessed with this one game in particular. So I wanted to bring up this journal and this poet. And like I said, everything on this site is dedicated to, or is inspired by in some way, a video game. So
Interesting.
yeah, so I wanted to kind of transition from the idea of tech and social media to technology in a different way, and dealing with more what would be considered pop culture or hobbyist type of things, and what you can do with that and how you can incorporate it into poetry. But A Manual for All of Your Collisions by Jameson Crabtree over at cartridgelit.com. And this is back from June of 2015.
Cool.
And we'll have a link up and have you all set up with that so you can read this poem and weigh in on it. And if you have any opinions on These Violent Delights Have Violent Ends by Caitlin Gildrien, please let us know. You can email us at tableforDeuce@gmail.com or like make a comment on the video once we have it uploaded. And whoever does comments, the first person to comment can have a free copy of Jory Mickelson's full-length Wilderness Kingdom, which is a brilliant book. It is a lovely, lyrical, lush work by Jory. And I had the pleasure of editing it and working with them. So I can personally say it is one of my favorite debuts. So you should definitely read it. So definitely comment or email us so that you can get yourself a copy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yay.
Cool.
All right.
Gaming poetry is not something I expected.
No, exactly. We'll see. I am excited. This journal is it's such a like little market. I imagine. I can't imagine there is a huge following of people that need to read poetry based on video games or inspired by video games. I feel like maybe it's like me and 5 other people, but I'm in it. I'm ready for it.
All right.
So,
We'll have to. I can't wait to read it. So send me the link, and we'll go for it.
All right, and we'll tackle that. So, all right, everybody, thank you very much. Subscribe, share, spread the word about Table for Deuce if you like what we do. If not, definitely send us awesome, horrible critical emails, which we'd love to read, and all that. And join us. Send us flowers in mourning for poetry. As shout out to poetry. You served us well. Sorry you had to go out like that. Sorry T.S. Eliot took you out. Just took it as far as he could and then left us with nothing.